I'm trying to put you in the worst mood. P1 cleaner than your church shoes. Really point to just to hurt you. All red lamb just to tease you.
What is the deal, beautiful people? It's your boy Ramon. Welcome back to Lifestyles Defined. And today we're talking about this beauty, the Olympus OMD EM10 Mark II. Yes, it is a mouthful to say, but my God, this is a dope camera. So as I alluded to in the first video, where I pretty much announced after 2 days of use that this camera was my new street photography king, I've had a long time to play with it now. And you know what, I'm still head over heels impressed and in love with this camera. What a capable piece of technology, my God. So the premise here is simple, right? I did my street photography. I started out on a Sony NEX 5T, which I have right here. You can see this guy is small, compact, very nice little camera. Then I upgraded to a Sony A7S, I'm sorry, Sony A7 Mark II. And you know, that was going from an APS-C to a full frame. And the issue there I was having is, you know, the camera pretty much got me the images I want, but it was a lot to walk around with on a daily basis. You know, I live and work in New York City, so it was a lot to carry that A7 and this this lens. This thing's heavy, man. It may not look heavy, but it is, especially when you put it on the camera and then the camera's got the battery in it. Man, it was a nightmare. So that took me back to my NEX for the comfort of street photography and portability. And even when I travel for work, you know, I don't want to take my A7, I would take the NEX. And the issue I would run into there was the NEX was not good in low light, and that killed me. And I didn't want to invest any money in a low light prime, or I'm saying a prime with a wide aperture for the NEX, because it wouldn't solve the issue. You know, you shooting prime, you need some sort of stabilization. So that led me on a search to go out there in the market and find a mid-range camera, something that was small, something that was compact, and something that had image stabilization. And I came up on this, the OMD EM10 Mark II. But there was a few other cameras in the run-in. It wouldn't have been the Sony A6000 or A6300, whatever it was at the time, because again, the image stabilization, the 5-axis stabilization was very important to me. I think there was a model from Fuji that was in there, but during that time in my research, I had actually purchased the camera that I'm shooting this review on right now, which is a Panasonic G7. And that led me directly to the Olympus, because the G7, the Panasonic and the Olympus, they share lenses. So any lenses I would buy in the Micro Four Thirds system would be interchangeable for me for video and photography. So that was a no-brainer. I pulled the trigger. I got this guy. I actually put it on the Christmas list, and the lady got it for me. And my God, what an amazing little camera. I know it's a lot, but I wanted to lay the groundwork as to why this camera was a choice for me, because there's so many other dope cameras and choices out there, but for me, this was it. I'm not doing much video, if any video at all on this, and that's a very interesting distinction to make, because the G7, which I'm shooting on, so much better at video, but that's not what's important to me for my day-to-day street photography camera. Also, this versus something like my A7, my Sony A7, the Olympus obviously wins because it's much smaller, and it enables me to stand out a lot less, you know. Sometimes I'd be doing street photography with this big, huge camera, this big lens. People just sort of look at you like, dude, what the hell? So that was a real thing. But yeah, the physical size of this camera is definitely one of, I would call it a feature that I love. And it's got this all metal body, and it's quite hefty versus the size. You look at it and then you pick it up and you go, whoa, I did not expect it to really really feel like that, right? And it does. It feels nice, and the design of it, I just love it. It's such an attractive camera, and especially you've got these big clear knobs on the top, and they're very easy to push, very easy to turn and dial in. If I had to choose, I would like one more knob for my ISO, but I can live with that. ISO is one of the things that, you know, I lastly adjust, so that was okay. But yeah, the size of this camera plus one of those collapsible lenses, which I actually do have one. It's what I'm shooting right now on the Panasonic. I think it's a 14 to 32 or something like that. That guy, it's a collapsible zoom lens, so when you turn it off or you collapse it, the camera is actually really pocketable. And I've heard people say that before. I'm like, yeah, whatever. These dudes got like jacket pockets the size of Texas, and no, this thing actually does fit. It can fit in your jacket pocket, and I thought that was pretty dope. I was very impressed by that. The look and feel of it, I just can't get enough. You know, I do hold it a little awkward. The grip is not as big as I'm used to, but it definitely, it's easy for me. I adjusted to how I hold it. I got the way I hold it now. It's fine. I really like the ergonomics of this camera. Talking about mirrorless cameras, which is what this is, Micro Four Thirds to be exact. One of the things that I have always hated about shooting Canon and so Nikon, I never really looked into it, is I felt like they were lacking certain features. It was like, guys, this is not 2001. Like, why don't we have touchscreens? And this guy, and let's be clear here, I had a touchscreen on my NEX, which I loved, by the way. I did not have a touchscreen on my A7, which was just perplexing to me. Like, I'm sorry, if I'm buying the pro model of something, then I expect to get all the features that the models below it has. But whatever the case is, this guy, the OMD, actually does have a touchscreen, and it is not a touchscreen for having a touchscreen's sake. There's a lot of dope things you can do with it. I mean, yes, you can flick your pictures back and forth like you would on a cell phone when reviewing images. You can scroll through the menu with the touchscreen. But most interesting to me is there's a few different modes. You can tap to focus, which I think is super dope, and I heard it works well in video, but again, I'm not using this camera for video. There's another one where you can tap to focus and take the picture, so by one tap the camera focuses where you tap and takes the picture, something we've become used to in the cell phone world. And then the third one that really blew my mind is when you have the camera up to your eye and you're using the EVF, you can use your thumb. It's the weirdest thing to try to explain, but you can use your thumb to cycle through the focus grid and the focus points in the camera. That was so dope. I never even envisioned that being a feature, but that's something that when you use it, you're like, wow, that is interesting. It can almost be faster than using the focus ring on the manual focus ring on the lens. So that, I think, is a very dope feature, and I like to see in Olympus and Panasonic, by the way, has got a bunch of these really innovative features that it's like they're pushing the software boundary, and I really like that, man. That's something that's cool. It's nice to see them take advantage of the touchscreen in such a way. Speaking of the EVF, I don't have much qualms with the EVF. I mean, you know, I started getting serious with photography with the NEX, and that didn't have an EVF. I was just looking at the back of a touchscreen all day. I got my my A7, and I was like, oh wow, EVF is cool. And that is something that I would never go back to a DSLR, because you learn the value of seeing real-time exposure on how your image is going to be through a EVF. That's priceless. And here's the same deal. The EVF is clear. It gives all the information that the touchscreen does, and I don't have much of a problem. I don't notice much lag, and I'm sure there's some people that'll point out, oh, it's 0.645 seconds slower than a DSLR. Like, dude, I don't care. I'm not shooting sports photography. The EVF is fine. It's beautiful. It's bright. I can see what the hell's going on at night. That's all I care about. So we come down to the 5-axis image stabilization, or 5-axis stabilization. This was a huge deal to me because, you know, I live in New York, and during the winter months, I can get out at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock from work, and it's pitch dark. And I still want to do some street photography. I still want to walk around and capture some things in the city. What the EVF does for me is, you know, I can probably pull out about an 800 ISO with, I want to say, a 1/120th, maybe something lower, like even like a 50th or 60th of a second. And this guy, you know, will still capture the image. And I'm not shooting any fast lenses here. I got the kit lens. This is the 14-42, 3.5 to 5.6. So it's not the greatest lens for nighttime photography, but it still gets the job done. And this gets me so excited for when I actually do get ready to purchase the lenses, which I'll talk about a little later in the video, that this thing will be an absolute beast, you know. And the 5-axis really gives me the confidence to hand hold at lower shutter speeds and get the shot. That was something that I was struggling with before with the NEX. So again, it just shows why for street photography, for what I needed this thing for, it is the right tool. So there are some elephants in the room. I went from an APS-C sensor to a full frame sensor. Now I'm rocking a micro four thirds sensor. And you know, it's only a 16 megapixel camera, and people always say, well, the quality is not as good, yada yada yada. You know, it's got its technical flaws, but what I find is, you know, it was about relearning the camera again. Yes, there are things that we know. There's things about the crop factor. So if you have to multiply the lens by 2. So if it's a 14, if it's a 14 or 42, it's really a 28 to 84, right? And then you also have to multiply the f-stop. So if I get a prime that's actually a 2.8, it's not a 2.8, it's a 5.6. So to get that real life 2.8, I'd have to go down to like a 1.4 or something like that, right? And I've also read where you have to multiply the ISO, and some people say you don't, some people say you do, some people say yes you do, because that's why traditionally speaking the micro four thirds images or cameras they have a lot more noise in them, because the ISO you need to multiply by 4, not 2. I don't know how true that is. It all comes down to just using the goddamn camera. I don't get caught up in the science behind it. It's just about learning the camera. And for me, one thing I will say is on this kit 14-42, images are super sharp. I mean, I've probably gotten more sharp images out of this OMD than I have in my Sony. And it's striking. And that's even with the whole the micro four thirds snobbing, like, oh, the sensor is too small, it can't take it seriously. Like, this camera's not a joke. The images that come out of this thing are super sharp, and it is really, really impressive. But it is not the perfect camera. So let's talk about autofocus. The autofocus on this thing is suspect. It does what's called as contrast autofocus as opposed to phase detection. And with 81 selectable points, the autofocus oftentimes does buffoonery, and I can't figure it out. I don't know why. It's super frustrating. The way I found around it is to, and I got this tip from Jerry, is to actually manually select the middle focal point, focus, and then recompose. Yes, that's a way around it. I would rather just have the autofocus work, because this is the first camera that I've ever had that just does not know what to do with itself. And I'm not talking, it does some hunting, yes, especially when I have the 12-32 Panasonic lens on there, and that thing has its own OIS. For whatever reason, it does this extra hunting, and that's okay, whatever. But It's something about the autofocus that drives me nuts. And I've looked on the forums and people say, yes, this is a problem. They recommend that you get the latest update. I'm not sure if I'm waiting to purchase my first lens. I'm not sure if it's a lens, is a kit lens thing, but right now it's a pain in my ass. It's something I have to deal with. I do have a way around it, so it's whatever. But I definitely thought that was something I should point out. The menu system on this camera is a nightmare. It is god awful. And the interesting part behind it is there's so much you can do to customize this camera to how you want it. But the penalty, the price you pay is a shit awful menu system to do so. I've got I think there's three function buttons on this thing. It took me forever to figure out how to customize them. You can do things like, and depending on which manual or which auto mode you're in, aperture priority, or these called manual modes, aperture priority or shutter priority, you're only going to be using one dial. So you can select which dial you want to use. You can select which way actually toggles it up or down. It's so much going on, and it's like mind-numbing, the stuff that, like, for instance, there's an exposure compensation meter when you're shooting in manual. I don't know how to enable it for the other modes like shutter and aperture. I gotta dive in somewhere on YouTube and see if I can figure it out, but it's not a big deal for me right now. But at some point I do need to figure that out, because I want to know when the image is over or underexposed. And it's there in manual. The first thing you do, you turn it on, it's there, but it's not there in any other modes. What the hell? In terms of lenses, I've done my homework and I know what lenses I want. And this is what I went through with my A7, right? I got me an adapter and I flushed out my lens range with old Minolta glass. And I'm going to do the same here. Because the kit lens is so sharp, that 14 to 42 range is covered. I have, even though it's a 3.5 to 5.6 variable aperture lens, I have total confidence in this kit lens and how sharp it is. Not even worried about that. I don't even want to get the pro version of it with the 2.8. It's not worth it to me. And from the research I've done, those 2.8 versions, those pro versions, those pro zooms, they're bigger and they're not necessarily sharper. So I'm staying with this kit lens. It's nice and small. On the lower end, I'm going to go for that 17 millimeter, that prime. I think it's 17 millimeter 1.7. I really, really want that. And then on the higher end, I'm going for the 75 millimeter 1.8. That's a super portrait, when many say it's one of the sharpest lenses ever made. I really want that because, I'm getting serious about my portraiture. I can't say that word to save my life, but that's definitely the two lenses that I'm going to go after. And after that, I think I'm fine. Maybe I'll get something a little wider, maybe like a fisheye. I've seen some 8 millimeters out there. I might pick one of those up for that extreme wide angle. But other than that, I think those are the two go-to lenses right now. And it's amazing. It's a whole new world for me to start to research, and people just say, you know what, for the money you spend for the Micro Four Thirds system, these lenses are sharp and they're cheap and they're small. That is super dope. That is good stuff. To end the review on a positive note, there's some very nice things about this camera I like. There's this live composite mode where what it does is you pretty much set the perfectly exposed image, and then you let the camera do the rest of the work. The shutter stays open, and it adds any additional light to the base image. So if you picture something like a thunderstorm, you set the overall image, and then every streak of lightning that comes down, it adds it to the image. So at the end of that image, however long you want, you could run it for 10 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, however long you run that, at the end of it, you'll get all the streaks of lightning. So that I thought was super dope. It has silent shutter. Silent shutter is one of those dangerous things where you need to watch out in low light, because you can get banded in your image, which is that line across it. But the silent shutter mode here, I haven't encountered that, and it's been really good, especially when you're on that scumbag photography. You're taking pictures of people inside you don't want them to know. It's got a high shutter speed. You can go up to like 1/16 1/16,000th of a second, which is ridiculous. And what that does, I can get up to like 8.5 shots a second. And I particularly like that for street photography because I compose the shot and I capture 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 6 shots at a time. And that gives me the confidence that when I get home, I'm gonna have at least 2 to 3 really razor sharp images to work with. So I really like that. It's got a focus bracketing mode, which I haven't played yet. I'm looking forward to getting into that. Focus bracketing can be dope, and that's how you get tack sharp images from back to front. I got to do some more research on that. I do use regular bracketing, so you know it's how you get your HDR modes, your HDR images to look nice and whatnot. But I mean, as a whole, this camera is a complete win. I definitely recommend it for anyone looking for a mid-range camera, or any heavy enthusiasts or pro photographers looking for just a travel companion, man. These guys are serious, and I wish people would take Micro Four Thirds more serious, because they are the photo snobs in the world who haven't used it. And they, you know, despite what you may think, you need to use something before you form your opinion. It's always that way. And I get why people look at numbers and they get their technical speak about it. And they're like, nah, no way, no way. You might want to use this. If you can get your hands on one of these guys, it's definitely worth it. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Don't forget to like the video. And before I go, this is going to be the last photography video that you're going to see on the main Lifestyles Defined channel. I want you guys to head over, hit the comments below, head over to our photography focus channel where we do all of this stuff all day long. Subscribe to that. And if you guys aren't familiar, if you're on the photography channel, you're seeing this and you're like, wait, what is he talking about, main channel? Look in the description. Look in the links in the description. We've got channels for photography, sneakers, watches, all of that stuff. On the main channel is all about technology. We got an Ignorant Gamers all about gaming. So yeah, you know, join the community. It's a really dope community. Tightly knit, very vocal. Join in, have some fun with us. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Plenty more content coming, and if you will, there's a bell next to that subscribe button that lets you be the first to know when our videos are live. My name is Ramon, and I'm out of here. Peace.